Going live, going live. Excellent. So, it's been a while since I've done one of these podcasts. Welcome. So, if we're going to discuss a lot of things, and then you guys can ask me questions, I can give answers, and then we can discuss more topics. But obviously, the big topics at the moment, the real big topics, obviously, the Israel Folau ongoing saga with Rugby Australia, and that's possibly one of the biggest topics I think I've followed in quite some time. And I've been following what Israel Folau and the issues around what he said or posted. Rugby Australia's response initially a year ago, then him getting that lengthy contract, and then it happening again, and then they terminate said contract. And I've discussed it in multiple videos, and it's not to do with an attack on religion. It is literally to do with a breach of contract. That's basically what it comes down to. And did he actually breach his contract or not? But it's really interesting because the dynamics behind it, there's so many other things at play with Rugby Australia and the Israel Folau saga. And it is the gift that keeps on giving. And, there are some of the points that I looked at and raised, and it's kind of obvious that there's a lot of ills within Rugby Australia that date back 2 decades. There are issues in Australian rugby union. And Israel Folau is a symptom of the issues that are going on. Is the Israel Folau saga, you could look at Kurtley Beale and go, well, they treated Kurtley Beale differently. He didn't have his contract terminated after some of his scandal. Israel Folau posts a few little things on Instagram. Everyone loses their minds. Kurtley Beale can make sexist comments, be linked to drug taking, alcoholic incidents, and he's just given a slap on the wrist. And then you can look at it in various ways with their lack of consistency and discipline. In Rugby League, we've got the Jack de Belin saga that's ongoing, and he's lost his appeal against the NRL no fault stand down policy, which basically means until his trial is concluded, he won't be able to play rugby league. And the Super League over here in the UK has backed up the NRL with that as well, saying that if he's suspended by the NRL, he cannot side over here in the Super League and play. So he may never play ever again, even if he's found innocent. He's out the game at the moment, and his trial date could be as long as 18 months away. And that also sets a precedent down the line for players, regardless of the offence that he's been charged with, which is quite a serious offence. But it's a precedent being set that if a player is under police investigation until said investigation is concluded, they can't play. That's setting a very dangerous precedent that I can see more legal challenges coming from that. Of course, we've got the World Ice Hockey Championships, the IHF World Championships with Great Britain taking part. I've watched a fair few of the games. I've watched a lot of Great Britain's games. Close in 2 of them, not close in 3 of them when it comes to scoreline. They've got to target the Slovakia and France games. They've got to win one of those 2, take that one to overtime to have a chance, I think, of staying up in the top division. But even so, the journey that the team's been on the last 3-4 years is a good journey. A lot of these players have put themselves in the shop window for bigger teams in Europe and possibly North America. Ben Bounds, especially the goaltender, I can definitely see some North American teams looking at him, wanting to possibly get his signature at some point within the next 12 months. But I think the Slovakians have put on a really good show. Of course, not all the NHL players are available because of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Especially the Canadian and US teams haven't got all their best players available for a variety of reasons. And that is striking in itself. Obviously, the North American hockey market's still obsessed with the Stanley Cup playoffs for another 3-4 weeks. It's unfortunate that the World Championships clash with the Stanley Cup playoffs, but it is what it is. Ice hockey in the summer, the ice surface won't be great. If it was played in June, July, especially the European continental summers can hit 35 to 40 degrees. The ice surface would be pretty hard to maintain. They have to take place in April, May time. That will clash with the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so not all of the best NHL talent is available to be selected. And that is a shame that you haven't got certain players either fit enough or available for selection to play because they obviously want to win the Stanley Cup. And then there's obviously the debate about Seattle and what they're going to be called and their joining of the league. in the NHL, and that's going to be interesting. To see how that all transpires. Hello, Taylor. Nice to see you. There's also a lot of other things going on in sport. We've obviously had the Women's FA Cup final. We've got the Women's Football World Cup taking place this summer. A lot of that gets overlooked with male tournaments in cricket and rugby union taking place this year, World Cups. But the Women's World Cup in France is taking place. And I don't know what the TV audience is going to be, and a lot of people go, "Why is women's football getting such presence on terrestrial TV, especially on the BBC here in the UK?" And it's a national sport, and the women's team are actually doing surprisingly well. I think the development that women's football has taken in the last decade has been positive. While it will never be on the equal of the men's game, and nor should it be considered on the equal of the men's game, they're making huge strides and huge progression that wasn't being made before. And they're one of the favourites of the World Cup. So we have to see how Phil Neville's team does and take it from there. And a lot of people post a lot. You can look online, the amount of negative comments. Well, you don't have to watch it. You don't have to watch it. That's what I tell people is, you don't have to watch this stuff. If you don't like it, don't watch it. Only complaining about something that you're not interested in. On a British ice hockey note, obviously the Milton Keynes Lightning are finding themselves in a possible similar position to the Manchester Phoenix with rink issues. Opinion on the Leeds Chiefs. It's great to see another city take up the sport. But player recruitment's going to be interesting. What players are they going to be able to recruit? Are they going to be like Hull and Sheffield and Billingham cast-offs? Is there enough hockey talent in Leeds to want to play for the hometown team? Who are they going to pick up? Are they going to pick up depth players on two-way contracts from some of the elite league sides as a developmental team? The thing is, we have to obviously wait and see how that team performs when the season rolls around in September, when they start playing games. But it's good to see a new team start up. But there are teams with issues who are currently going, like Basingstoke with their rink. Milton Keynes Lightning have dropped down from the Elite League. Not sure about their rink either with their ice time. We've lost the Edinburgh Capitals a year ago. So there are some issues. There are lots of issues, actually, within British ice hockey. But the growth that the sport has had in recent years, with the success of the men's national side, the fact that we're now on international broadcasts, playing at the World Championships, where the North American market can see our players, which is a big thing. The fact that the Great Britain national side is playing against NHL and KHL level players at the World Championships, that's going to have a positive impact, whether GB stay up in the top division or not. The game against France is going to be an interesting one. The game against Slovakia this evening is going to be quite important as well. But, you have to look at the progression the team has made, and this is a steep learning curve. The Leeds Chiefs, until a full roster is announced and they play their first game, I don't know what my opinion really is. Does Leeds, though, have enough people in the Leeds area who follow the sport or be interested in following the sport? Because you've got the Sheffield teams, you've got Hull, you've got Nottingham not a million miles away. There are some big elite league cities and national league cities that have had hockey for a long time around Leeds. Will there be enough people in Leeds who'll be willing to support a Leeds team over the other teams in the northwest who've been established for decades? That's a problem you have when you're starting a team from scratch, is to try and get the players in and to buy in, these players to buy in and be part of the program, but also trying to convert fans who, especially in Leeds, which is a rugby league, rugby union, and football city. So you've got Leeds United in football, you've got the Yorkshire Carnegie in rugby union, and you've got the Leeds Rhinos in rugby league. You've got to try and also convert some of those fans to the Leeds Chiefs, and that can be a difficult thing to do. Those three sports are well established. Leeds have won titles in two of the three sports mentioned at the top level. They've been national champions in football, admittedly a long time ago. Leeds Rhinos are one of the most successful Super League sides in the Super League era, if not the most successful in the last 20 years. Look at the silverware Leeds Rhinos have, and then you got to look at the Carnegie, Yorkshire Carnegie, formerly Leeds, who play at Headingley as well. They were once a Premiership side for a long period of time, and were pretty solid. Premiership side for a long period of time. And you have to look at that and go, can they build a fan base considering they have to compete against 3 other major sports, 2 of which are played at the same time of year as ice hockey is? That's the question you got to ask yourself. But the thing with Leeds, a positive, it's a sports city. University city as well. So there's a lot of overseas students in Leeds. So that helps. You've got a lot of people from all over the world going to Leeds for work. It's a very cosmopolitan place. If there's enough North Americans in Leeds, for example, they might definitely buy in. And also you've got to look at the fact that, Yorkshire, you got your 2 professional teams in Sheffield, you've got a professional team in Hull. They like ice hockey in that part of the world. It's just whether it's the right market in Leeds. But the fact that they've put so much money in the rink and they've decided to, register a team shows that there is definitely intent there. Now we just have to see how successful this Leeds team can be, and what the future holds for, ice hockey. There's a new team on the map though, and that can only be a positive considering some of the negative stories we've had the last couple of years with Basingstoke and Milton Keynes and Invicta having to crowdfund, and the Thunder, the other Milton Keynes team, having to crowdfund to survive. This is a positive. I don't think 5 years ago this would have happened. So in that respect, it's a positive. It's all about the player recruitment now and getting enough players. Sam Zajac, well, I've seen him play a lot for various teams in the old EPIHL and National League for the last 10 or so years. He's an experienced player at that level. So he has that experience of playing in that second tier kind of level, developmental league, semi-pro kind of level that most of his teammates will be. So he understands that, that level of game. I think I'm not a big fan of player managers in any sport. I think we saw it with the Battle Bees the season before last. Last year, basically, with Scotty Spearing doing it, and it didn't work. And that's me being totally brutally honest. You cannot devote all your energies to being a manager, and you cannot devote all your energies to being a player. Ashley Tate, I don't know enough on Ashley Tate because he doesn't play for a team that I follow, but I saw it with my own eyes at Bracknell. Adam Bicknell about a decade ago tried it as well, and it didn't work. It didn't work, and when things were going bad, that bad form it didn't work. I've seen it with Lucas Schmidl. It didn't work with him. It was actually pretty terrible with Lucas Schmidl at the helm as player coach. I think with the way modern sport is now, I think it's a very outdated concept. There's a reason why very, very few teams do it. You have to devote all your energies to being the coach or a player. You cannot have it both ways. It really detracts from what you've got to do as a team. It really, it's very difficult. You've got to juggle it, and if these, it does help having an assistant as well, and but some teams just don't have that budget to pay all these people. But we'll have to see what happens. The fact that he's coming as a player coach, I think he's close to winding down his playing career, and he wants to go into full-time coaching, and that can only be a positive having another young coach coming through. I think Doug Shepherd was player coach for a while at one of the teams he was at, but I'm not going to pass judgment on those teams that do it. I just don't think personally it works. You've got to put all your efforts into to coaching if you're going to go into that kind of coaching role. But Gordie Howe, I think, is the best example of a player coach who was actually reasonably successful in the NHL in the early 80s with the Hartford Whalers. That's the only time I can really think off the top of my head that it actually sort of worked. But it's a difficult one. There's a reason why it doesn't happen in a variety of sports at the moment anymore. With the raise in fitness levels, even at the lower levels of sport, the semi-pro and amateur levels of sport, with the fitness levels going up and skill set of athletes being, I think, the highest it's ever been, and the physicality at the highest it's ever been. You have to devote all your energies to one or the other. You cannot be both. But that's my personal opinion on that. I think Leeds, getting Sam Zajac in, that's a sign of intent. He's an experienced player at the level that they're going to be playing at. He's played for a variety of teams. I think Swindon was his last team. He's exceptionally experienced. He will have the knowledge of a lot of the players that he'll be playing alongside and recruiting as well, because he'll have a say on recruitment. And that's something else that I think people fail to realise at lower levels of ice hockey or football or rugby league or whatever sport it may be. The actual coach or manager has a bigger say on recruitment, because he doesn't have those scouts going out for him to say, look at, we looked at this player, we think the team should sign him. Because the money's so tight, you have to, put a team together that will gel quickly and that you will know personally. The interesting thing with Leeds is their overseas players, their import players, who they sign. Do they sign import players that have played in the UK for a while, or do they take a big risk and look straight overseas and try and snap up an import player who probably hasn't played in this country? That's going to be an interesting one. But with the Milton Keynes Lightning dropping down a level, a lot of their overseas players want to possibly stay in this country. They could all be snapped up as that marquee import. It's an interesting one because you allow that 2 import rule. I think we're going to have to see how this reformatted National League top division works, because what they had in place for the last 2 seasons didn't. And I'm being totally honest. I always felt that they should have tried to save the EPIHL, maybe adjusting the import rule to make it like 3 rather than 4 in a squad. But I always felt that worked, even though my team were absolutely hopeless in the later Bracknell, absolutely hopeless. I felt it worked as a good solid second tier, because you could have any of all those teams on 2-way contract like agreements with the Elite League. If you had Elite League 10, EPIHL 10, and then the National League feeding up, you could have affiliates and all that kind of thing. And then you also had the opportunity for those second tier teams to take that next step, like Guildford and Milton Keynes did. Am I watching any of the sport this weekend? I'm watching the FA Cup final at 5. I'll be trying also to catch a bit more of the World Championship ice hockey, but there's some games taking place now that I'm not interested in. There's another game starting just before the FA Cup final, so I'm just going to have to watch the full match replays later on this evening. I've got to catch up with the NRL. There was a couple of games played that I'm going to watch. I can't watch every single game, which is frustrating. But the FA Cup final is the big one. I'll be watching that at 5 o'clock. Then I'll be doing my post-match review and get the whiteboard out and do all that this evening. And then if I'm lucky enough, I might be able to catch a bit of the World Championship ice hockey with Britain and Slovakia, but I might not be able to. The Monaco Grand Prix. If I'm brutally honest, and I'm being brutally honest, I've completely gone off F1. It's got to a point now where there's only one live race on free-to-air TV this year, and after that, there's none. So they're already risking the Liberty Media by already risking the British fan base massively. And the way I've gone off it basically. I was very critical of the Monaco Grand Prix last year and how it was basically a rolling traffic jam. It's just the most expensive traffic jam for me. None of the races really appeal to me. I think Spa is the only race that appeals to me, but I can't watch it live because they put it behind a paywall on Sky, and I think that was a big mistake. I think you have to have a balance between, Sky Sports and free to air. And when Eurosport was on free to air, they had the equal rights with ITV and Sky for a long, long time. And then Eurosport put itself behind a paywall, which I thought was a mistake. But at the end of the day, that's the state of modern media. It is what it is. But I went off it a long time ago. I think the current package that they have with the rules and things like that, overtaking is so difficult. And it's lost a lot of the luster. I think the rules package they have at the moment doesn't work. The tyre the tyre situation, people have complained about for a long, long time now. This is why I watch touring cars. This is why I watch the superbikes. Obviously, MotoGP's put itself behind a paywall on BT Sport, which I think is another mistake, risking fan bases across Europe, because at the end of the day, they're chasing the money. They're going to some of these locations that have shocking human rights records, but they're chasing the money of the Middle East, where a lot of these races are now held, and the tracks are dull and antiseptic. It's just not. I prefer touring cars, so I just prefer touring car, NASCAR racing over single seater racing. I think it's more fun. It's wheel to wheel. You can have a bit of body contact. Most of the vehicles are pretty evenly matched. It's down to driver skill and setup. Whereas it's Mercedes, we've got a better car. That's it, really. Yes, the Football League playoffs are also in full swing now. It's going to be interesting to see who gets promoted out of the Championship, because obviously Leeds lost to Derby. It's Derby Villa. It'd be nice to see Frank Lampard managing the Premier League. But here's the thing. I mean, look what happened this season. Two of the sides to get relegated were promoted sides. Fulham were just atrocious, and Cardiff, they never seem to take that next step. And I don't know, but there's a lot of issues with football, which we've discussed to death on this channel over the last 2 years, and especially the last year on doing live streams. I've been doing live streams for over a year now. We have discussed to death the state and the financial state of football, and you just got to look at the Champions League and Europa League finals, where Chelsea and Arsenal have handed back half their ticket allocation because people just cannot get there. And this is what I find so interesting with UEFA. They named Baku as the final hosting venue back in 2017. And compare that to other sports like the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. Okay. The World Series, Major League Baseball. Until very near the end, you don't know. It's a final between two teams, and they share the venue rights. They can do that turnaround and get tickets sold and fans in the arenas in less than a week. Football, they could have quite quickly worked out very close to the quarterfinals. Okay, here's the geographical location of the finalists. Who's the closest team? Who's the furthest away? What's an appropriate venue? But they've chased the money. And out of a 68,000 seat stadium, only 12,000 tickets were given over to the two clubs. That's an absolute joke. But I think UEFA realised that the uptake on tickets for that kind of location from most Western European and Central European locations was probably going to be very, very low, and they wanted to avoid an empty stadium. The amount of corporate tickets sold is sickening. They have given tickets to the locals, which I think is always a good thing. I think you've always got to get the locals on board if the city's going to host a cup final. Quite rightly, for the local football going public or sport going public deserve to be able to buy tickets and watch the game. Absolutely. But the fact that out of a 68,000 seat stadium, only 12,000 tickets were given over to the two finalists is pretty embarrassing. And the fact that half those tickets have been given back is pretty damning as well. The airport is not fit for purpose. There's no direct flights. And then ticket prices have been ramped up by EasyJet and Ryanair, which is also pretty disgraceful. Let's not kid ourselves. But we had this same issue with Catalan Dragons getting to the Challenge Cup final. They only had I don't know what it is about European travel and getting tickets for things, but sports fans in Europe are getting screwed over across Europe. It's not just British fans. The Catalan Dragon fans from predominantly France, but partly from Spain as well. Look how few of their allocation was sold for the Challenge Cup final last year. And a lot of complaints were made that not enough was done to allow the French fans, transportation and the price of tickets as well. You're in a semi-final, you win that semi-final. Yeah, I think they had a very short period of time in which to to buy tickets and prepare their travel plans, because there's no way they're going to be able to do it in a day. Predominantly because Perpignan is not a big place. Although the Catalan region of France and Spain is reasonably large, but Perpignan, the main town where they play, is not a major transport hub. It's in a very rural area of France. It's a regional town. There's not many direct flights to London, if any. Yeah, I think sometimes you've got to look at your finalists and go, let's possibly find a more suitable venue. And it can be done, but these major sports, they're chasing the money, they're chasing the corporate money, and it is what it is. Street circuit races, not all street circuits are done in qualifying. There's quite a few of them where it actually can be quite interesting if the circuit is wide enough. So I wouldn't say all street circuit races are done in qualifying. Some, yeah, you can have overtaking and fun racing, but yeah, some of them are pretty antiseptic. I'm not gonna lie, but if you watch the Australian Supercars, Surfers Paradise, that's full of car crashes all the time. That's a fun one. Adelaide's kind of fun as well. The Australian street circuit race scene is pretty good. I think there's a few other street, like Montreal. That's a great street circuit. The old Olympic Park in Montreal. That's a great street circuit. But yeah, St. Paul. There's another one. St. Petersburg in Florida. That's a lethal one. Long Beach, which they took away because it was too dangerous. There are some good ones, but there are also some pretty average street circuits. Conor McGregor. I don't know what else I can say about Conor McGregor. I'm getting a little bit bored, to be honest. The guy is clearly got issues, and I don't know how much longer that this can continue in that kind of sense, because if he was participating in team sports, he might not be able to get a visa to enter a country. We're seeing it with Mkhitaryan, with the fact he's Armenian, and of course the Europa League finals in Baku, which is Azerbaijan, and those two countries have been in a state of war since 1988. So his safety cannot be guaranteed. So he might not be able to play. That's another criticism aimed at UEFA, because they've chosen a location where there is a player who is playing, who's cannot be guaranteed his safety. He might have some Azerbaijani nationalists take pot shots at him. So there you go. The Conor McGregor thing, it's an ongoing saga with him, isn't it? It's an ongoing mess. He's like the MMA equivalent of Mike Tyson. Obviously, controversy sells and keeps people interested, but there's got to come a point where it's actually more damaging for the sport to have someone like Conor McGregor as the face of it than useful. And it's not painting MMA sport as a sport as a whole in a positive light, considering the type of sport that it is, and and the media and corporations will be looking at that going, do we want to associate our company or our brand or what we represent, our values with this sport, if this individual keeps getting in trouble? This is why boxing's got issues. I honestly, I don't know how much longer it can continue. With Conor McGregor, before they go, we're revoking your fighting license. You're not going to be able to get a fight license, because it is exceptionally damaging for the brand of UFC. The UFC is a brand which is grown massively over the last 10 years as promotion. It has grown massively, but at the same time, it's got with a lot of controversy and a lot of baggage with it, and eventually there's going to be an incident, whether it involves McGregor or someone else, and it tarnishes the brand irreparably, and then sponsors start pulling out, broadcasters start pulling out, and various national jurisdictions refuse to allow it to host events and block it. And then it affects other promotions like Bellator, which is actually a pretty decent promotion. I've seen some of Bellator's promotions on Channel 5. It's a smaller promotion, but it does affect. The phone one where he got arrested in Florida. I knew about that. And then he announced that he's retiring again. I don't honestly know what's going to happen with Conor McGregor, whether he's going to fight again. But with these constant issues that he's got, and these legal issues he keeps having, however minor they may be in the big scheme of things, they do build up, and you build up a picture of what this person's like, and it's not a he's not coming out looking like a saint. Let's be honest. I it's also, I think UFC are trying to distance themselves from him. I think that'll be their best thing to do, because he's not doing their brand any good if he's constantly in trouble with various legal authorities around the world. Because the last, I would say, 12 months, it's not been good PR. And we've seen a lot in sport right now where public relations is key. Look at the Israel Folau Rugby Australia ongoing issues, okay? Look at the Jack de Belin and NRL. And if you don't know who Jack de Belin is, he's a top level rugby league player in the NRL in Australia. He's facing rape charges. He's facing serious charges that could land him up to 15 years in prison. The Israel Folau one, it's just controversy and it's toxic and it's dividing opinion, and the PR machine is in overdrive trying to damage limitation. And what I'm saying is like, yeah, it's a matter of time before Conor McGregor does something absolutely stupid that really makes headline news around the world. A lot of Irish sports fans have turned against him. And that says something, because the Irish like their boxers and like their MMA. And when they're saying, the guy's an idiot, we're not fans of his, he doesn't represent our country in a positive light, he gives us a bad reputation, that says something. That does say something. I mean, the Irish are famed for their boxing talent, their MMA talent. They pride themselves on being a production line of these sports with some great fighters, and they pride themselves on the physical sports, producing physical specimens that can compete in rugby union, boxing, MMA. They pride themselves, and when they're saying he's not their favourite cup of tea, that does tell you something about how he's damaged his reputation in Ireland. People think he's an idiot. But yeah, it is a matter of time before a judge decides that they're going to put him on trial, where a chance of a custodial sentence could be the result, where a plea deal is not accepted and go, well, look, we're going to put you to trial, we've got enough evidence, it could end in a custodial sentence. Absolutely. But that could have been what happened with the Brooklyn thing. So he got very lucky with Brooklyn that he didn't go and get a suspended or permanent custodial sentence. I mean, I'm not going to pass judgment on various legal systems, but yeah, he's running the risk that he could face time in prison for something. And because he's now such a big figure and a well-known figure, he's going to have to put in protective custody, because there'll be those in prison of the organised crime world who may have bet against him and he's cost them money in the past. And yeah, there could be people who want to do him harm. But talking about public relations and an individual being the face of a company or a face of a brand, you've got to look at Israel Folau in the rugby union, and you've got to look at Jack de Belin in the NRL, and the damage that their ongoing scandals is having on their particular sports that they play in. And the NRL has had the off season from hell. So if you're a rugby league fan and you look at what happened over Christmas in the NRL with 17 individual players being investigated for a variety of misdemeanors and offences, and several of them getting arrested and charged, the NRL went into this full rebranding overdrive. And I'm not overly happy with the rebranding overdrive. I don't think the logo needs to change. I don't think they needed to change how they branded certain things. But there had to be a culture change. And unfortunately, I think they're being very reactive, not proactive, in trying to get that culture change across. Is it risking the integrity of the sport? Absolutely. But a lot of fans have no faith in the NRL Supremo, Todd Greenberg, because he's given out such mixed messages in the past that no one believes what he says and no one trusts what he says. I'll put my hat on. This is fucking. It's better. That's better. Right. So, but no, the discussion point about sports scandal is there, and at the end of the day, Conor McGregor is damaging the brand of UFC, and it makes it harder for UFC to sell itself long term. What else have we got? Now I've answered all those questions very, very, very quickly. We can look at a lot of other things we can discuss. I mean, the Israel Folau thing. What does this mean for Australian Rugby Union? Well, he is their best player at this current time. Although there are some other good players that they have available to them. He's their superstar player. A lot of their attacking play goes through him, and now that he's not in the plans for the World Cup, a lot's going to hinge on how they perform as a team. Whether he's successful in his appeal, if he does decide to go that route, will he be accepted back into the squad? And will his prospective teammates be happy for him to return to the squad? That's another thing that people have failed to realise is, has he burned bridges with his teammates? Because there are various players who've come out and said they will refuse to share a field with him ever again. And that's pretty damning when people who are your prospective international teammates are saying we don't want to play with this guy. But as I said, Israel Folau, he's part of the story that is rugby union in Australia. Rugby union in Australia has had problems for a very, very long time, and those issues haven't been fixed well before Israel Folau was a Wally. And then you've got to look at what he did. And you've got to go back in time and look at the fact that they have been bleeding players to rugby league for 20 years. 20 years plus they have been losing talented youngsters to rugby league, and it is accelerating year on year. And you have to look at the basic salaries at semi-pro and professional level, and then you have to look at the quality level they're playing at, and then you have to look at development programs and opportunities to play at a top level. And the NRL provides far more opportunities for young players to get into the sport and to have a chance to make a career, even if it's for a brief period. They can earn enough money where they could buy a house. Where in rugby union they will most likely end up playing abroad, and then they're lost to Australian rugby union, possibly forever. So, Rugby Australia, the issues they have go back a long time, and they're not changing. I think Rugby Australia needs to completely restructure itself and look at itself and go, why are we losing players to rugby league? Why are we struggling so badly in retaining players and getting players to stay in the sport as youngsters? Why are we struggling to do that? Why is there an issue in keeping players involved with the sport? And it's really interesting, to note the issues, and as I said last night in the video I did last night about the Israel Folau losing his appeal, he has the option to have a second code of conduct hearing. That's insanity to me. They've got to find 3 people who are not going to be biased either way to sit on a panel to determine whether he breached the code of conduct. I cannot see them going against the previous panel. But then that leaves them open to taking to an employment tribunal or the High Court. And that can get really messy and prolonged and cost a lot of money. And then you've got to look at the fact that they were so keen to get the Melbourne Rebels in as a Super Rugby franchise and expand, but then they weren't willing to support the Western Force with the money that they required to fill a funding black hole. But they're more than happy to give that money over a 4-year period to Israel Folau. It doesn't look good when you turn down a whole team of players for one player. financially. And the fact that he was being paid $4 million Australian dollars a year, he was one of the highest. I think he was the highest paid Australian sportsman last year. That rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. Riley Castle, she's a Kiwi. And there are those that are thinking to themselves, is she deliberately undermining Australian rugby union to give the Kiwis a better chance at the World Cup? Not that they need one. That hasn't gone down well. The fact that they've hired someone from another nation to run their international rugby union. So I'm going to have to do a video just solely on Rugby Australia and the issues that are facing it and the issues it's failed to deal with for 20 years. Israel Folau is the tip of an iceberg, and he's not the only issue. There's a lot of problems with rugby in Australia. Good evening or good day, because it's not even lunchtime yet. It's only 11:50. It's 10 to 12 in the morning here in the UK, so it's not even midday yet. So I'm assuming it's quite late at night in Australia and New Zealand. So I'm assuming it's like midnight, 1 o'clock. As I was saying, but no, good day, Uru. As I was saying, though, the Israel Folau saga, he's part of the, that's just one issue that Rugby Australia is facing. There's a whole host of problems that Rugby Australia has, and they're deep rooted. And when I mentioned like players like Cooper Cronk were playing rugby union at school, and now they're rugby league legends, that says a lot about the fact that they've lost the talents of Cooper Cronk. Let me just put that in perspective. Cooper Cronk played rugby union as a youth player. Let that sink in. That's what rugby union's lost in Australia is Cooper Cronk. He was one of the players about 20 years ago that decided to go into rugby league because the opportunities were there. A whole host of players since then have done it, and have been lost to union for 20 years. Well, yes. Good. Hello, Wellington. Obviously, we could discuss the All Blacks' chances at the World Cup. I think it's going to be harder for the All Blacks this time round to retain their trophy. I think it's going to be more difficult. I think there are some teams that just look like that on their day they could upset the All Blacks. I don't think the All Blacks will be as clear-cut favourites this time round when it comes to the World Cup. So I think this All Blacks side has peaked, and there's an opportunity for another team to beat them. The Irish proved in November last year that they were very, very human, and there were frailties there, and England nearly exploited them as well. I do think the All Blacks could be vulnerable. I still think the All Blacks overall are like the best team in the world. But I think the last, I would say, 18 months, they've started to show a lot of cracks and creaks. And in the last couple of years, Ireland have beaten them twice. I think, this could be the end of an era for the All Blacks. But you have to look at Super Rugby and go, okay, Super Rugby really actually benefiting the Southern Hemisphere nations as much as it could. And I think Super Rugby has been badly mismanaged. And that's having an impact not only on Australia, we've discussed, but also New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina. The Sunwolves have been dropped from Super Rugby. That's going to have an impact on the Japanese game, the hosts. Is Super Rugby really the ultimate rugby union competition in the world? I'm going to say no. I really think Super Rugby is being mismanaged, and it is losing players to Europe. And ironically, it's losing players to North America as well. There are several players playing in Major League Rugby who played Super Rugby who are lost to Super Rugby for a variety of reasons. And they've gone over to be the overseas player rule. There's a limit, I think, of 10 overseas players per team. And they've gone over to play in North America because the season's shorter, so they put less physical beating on their bodies. And they get paid. And this is an issue that rugby union's having, especially in the Southern Hemisphere, is that they are bleeding players to the Northern Hemisphere, where there's more corporate money, and they're losing players to Rugby League, which pays better. And this is an ongoing thing. Charlie Gubb, he's a Kiwi at youth level union. He's now playing league because he can get paid. Angus Crichton, Sydney Rooster, former Sydney Rabbitoh, union player at youth, playing league. Just imagine if you had like Charlie Gubb and Angus Crichton as your centre partnership, as ball running centres, or as flankers with their ball handling skills and their physicality. That would be very, very difficult to stop. And that's there. The Warriors. The issue with the Warriors, and I'm being honest, they can score tries. They can be fun to watch. I think signing Cody Nikorima is an interesting signing. You got Blair and Torhu Harris, so you've got some big name international players who've decided to go back to New Zealand. The issue is their consistency. The issue is, I think I don't know what it is about the Warriors, but they never seem to really string a season together. They underwhelm, and especially with the amount of Kiwi talent they have, they regularly don't do what you think they can do. But when they're on their day, they can score a hatful of tries and they can put opponents to the sword. Look what they've done to Penrith. But at the same time, they can also be absolutely battered and lose heavily. And I don't quite know how you get the best out of the Warriors team. I think, do you place a second team in New Zealand on the South Island? Is that an option? Because I think that will probably make it better for them, more competition. But it's an interesting one. But some great players have come out the Warriors. Like Sean Johnson, one of the best players in rugby league in the world. You've got players like Torhu Harris and Adam Blair who look how much they've won in the game. There are some absolutely brilliant players that have come through the Warriors, and the issue is, I think, it is frustrating watching the Warriors because you know that they can do some really amazing things. They've got some great skill players, they've got some big power runners, but they just defensively are just not good enough, and the intensity level just disappears. And is it because they've got too many Kiwi players and that they possibly need more Australian or European talent? Because it's basically the Kiwi national side. That's a question you've got to ask. Do they need that second team in the South Island to really have a rivalry and actually push each other to be better? Because I don't know, they have had some brilliant players, but they've also had some very, very average players as well, and they've also lost some players like Nickel Clockstead. He's I'm a Raiders fan, so I'm going to be a bit biased here, but the way he's played for the Raiders so far this season, he's been outstanding, an outstanding player, and I think the Warriors misused him and mishandled him badly because look what he's doing now with the Raiders. What was he doing with the Warriors? He was a bit part player, and they didn't utilise him effectively. They mismanaged him. He was a young talent, and he lost a lot of game time because he wasn't playing. He was the spare man, and that could have hindered his development. The Raiders are giving him a lot of responsibility at fullback. The New Zealand Warriors barely played him, and you want to play. But yeah, no, some of the Kiwis are absolutely wonderful players, brilliantly qualified, absolutely amazingly skilled. But the problem is the team as a whole. There are issues with the structures. That's the playing structure. I'm not talking about the off the field structures, like the structured set plays, the off the cuff play where you have to think on your feet. The combinations, some of the players they've got there, they haven't got the balance of the team right. I think you've got to put together a team that's going to play well. And the issue with the Warriors is they're in New Zealand, and how many Aussie players are going to want to leave Brisbane or Sydney to go there and play? That's the question you have to ask: is how many, even some of the Kiwi players you've been playing in Australia in the NRL, how many of them can you entice away to go back to New Zealand? That's a question you have to ask. Is also, can you get the overseas talent? Now, you've had Sam Tompkins, but he really felt he wasn't good enough when he was there. He was not good enough when he played in the NRL. Can you entice that kind of Super League player who will actually be pretty solid? That's another question you have to ask, because the best British talent plays in the Sydney area. So again, you've got to look at what kind of squad you can put together and get that squad balance between youth and experience, pace and power and skill, and get the balance right, but also get the combinations right, and get the defense as well. The defense is not good enough. They've got one of the worst, leakiest defenses in the league. Now they have improved and they've got a few wins now, but some of the defeats the Warriors have had, they were beaten in the contact area. They were, losing ground in the tackle. They've been dominated, and if you lose that contact area, it makes it difficult to get up the other end of the field and have a scoring opportunity. The Broncos, I think, that could be an interesting game, because both sides, I think, have been below expectations. The Broncos, not good enough. The Warriors have been very inconsistent, and that could be a make or break game for both sides, because when you're going into the Origin period, this is when the Warriors pick up wins. They have less Origin players. As far as I'm aware, I don't think they have any Origin players this season, and this is where they can name a full strength squad, whereas other teams are losing some of their best players for a month. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what the Warriors do over this year's Origin period. But at the same time, the Broncos have got some form going now. They've given their rivals a massive head start. They've not been good enough. Anthony Seibold's under a lot of pressure, but the team's under a lot of pressure. And the Broncos have a very inexperienced interchange bench and actually a very inexperienced forward pack. And I think the Warriors, with Blair and Harris, they can target that Broncos forward pack, and the tackle area and the contact area, and who's dominant in the tackle is going to go a long way to who wins that game, because that's where the games we won and lost. That's where the game is going to be won and lost, and that is the tackle area. I think if you can get dominance there, and if you can get dominance in the tackle area, absolutely, you put yourself in a very solid position going forward, and it makes Brisbane. Bear in mind, the Broncos are a very young side. Their forward pack is exceptionally inexperienced. When things start going wrong, their heads do drop, and that's where you have to take the opportunity to really go for them and not let them settle, and not let them get back in the game, because there's a lack of leadership in their Broncos side. And when things are going against them, they let their heads drop, and there's not enough of the senior players stepping up and giving some encouragement, saying it's okay. You don't have to look in professional sport, especially team sports. You're not going to win every game. You're not going to dominate the opposition. You're not going to score 40, 50 points a game. There are games you're going to lose. It's part of a learning curve as a team, as a unit. And this is where experienced veteran players and veteran leadership within a squad is really important. And I don't think the Broncos have the right veterans there to lead the side around, because they have really had a shocking start to the season, and I don't think they make finals football. I think they're going to be too far back. I don't know. I honestly don't know. It possibly could be a tight game, but it could be one of those games where the Broncos just lay an egg. That you don't know what you're going to get with the Broncos either. The Broncos are probably harder to predict than the Warriors. With the Warriors, you know what style they're going to play. In attack, they're going to throw it around. It's defense, which is the Warriors' weakness. The Broncos, you don't know what Broncos team is going to turn up. You don't know what the mindset of the players is. And, early on, if you can force them into an error, put them on the back foot, their heads could drop. And this is the problem. And I don't think it's Anthony Seibold. I think it is genuinely the squad that they have available, and the players that re-signed, the players that left. This is what they've got. How much input Anthony Seibold had on scouting players and getting players to stay or players leaving, that's another question entirely. But the original plan was for Anthony Seibold and Wayne Bennett to stay at their respective clubs this season and make the change next season. And then in the off-season, they decided to speed up the process where Wayne Bennett goes to Sydney and Seibold left the Rabbitohs and went to the Broncos. And I think that was possibly a mistake. I think both sides are now regretting that decision to a certain extent. I think Wayne Bennett, I don't think is regretting. I think Wayne Bennett's quite happy with the Bunnies. I think they're doing very, very well. He's settled into coaching those players really well. The Burgess brothers have a good working relationship with him through his Coach of England role as England coach. But Anthony Seibold doesn't know a lot of these Broncos players, if any. He hasn't been able to entice Rabbitohs players to join him at Brisbane. These players are used. A lot of these younger players are used only to Wayne Bennett. A lot of the players have really, only ever played for Wayne Bennett. So he's going into a dressing room that isn't his dressing room. It's the previous coach. And to get his message across over, it's difficult. It is difficult. And I think Brisbane have mismanaged the whole transition from Wayne Bennett to Anthony Seibold by rushing it through a year early. I think that was a mistake. But the team is declining and needs a rebuild. And is Anthony Seibold the right coach? We'll wait and see. But it's been a tough start to the season, sure. The Melbourne Storm. They're always one of the favourites into going into any season, but how long can they keep up this consistency? This is what the Broncos are finding out, is that eventually you got to start having a losing season. You're not going to win and be a winning side every season. The Storm have shown some weaknesses. The Storm's a difficult one. I think Cameron Smith this could be his last season. I cannot see him continuing to next year, but he hasn't made an announcement on his future yet. But they've got some brilliant players. Their scouting is amazing. Where they find, especially the Fijian players they pick up, their scouting is very, very good. Craig Bellamy. There's a reason why he's been there for as long as he has. Can they go to 3 grand finals? 4 grand finals. Sorry, in a row. That'd be interesting. If they can do 4 grand finals in a row, that's going to be interesting to see if that is feasible. That's going to be an interesting one. I don't think that's been done before. 4 grand finals in a row, but at the same time, questions are still being asked about salary cap breach, and to keep that squad together, that core, with players like Cameron Smith, people are still sceptical about the Storm. I am surprised with the Melbourne Storm being in Melbourne as long as they have. There's not more Victorians playing in the NRL. More players who've come through Victorian Rugby League. Considering the success the Storm have had since inception, that's an interesting thought. But they have been, I think, alongside the Brisbane Broncos, one of the best sides in the modern era. But they're going to have to eventually lose. They will eventually start losing games more often than they're winning games. They're going to have to go through a rebuild at some point. In my mind, there can be no way that they can continue to be this good forever. There's only so far you can go with a group of players. And Craig Bellamy will at some point be enticed away, whether it's Queensland State of Origin or the national side or another team. He will eventually move on and go, I've gone as far as I can with Melbourne. I'm going to move on to another club. And that's going to be interesting when that happens. And Cameron Smith eventually is going to retire. At the end of the day, you've got to look at the wider picture and go, okay, I'm not a fan of the Storm, but they are human. They've shown frailties this season. Some close games that they've lost, which they shouldn't. And at times, they if you put them on the back foot, they don't like it. They don't like chasing the game. They like being chased. And it's how you start the game against them. If you can do what the Roosters did and make them play from behind, they didn't look like they had that 16-minute period where they got it back to 20-all. But apart from that, they were second best. And that's, I think, one of the ways you can get under their skin. Don't let them settle. Don't let them get into an arm wrestle. Try and use pace to outpace them and use your skill or power, whatever it may be. Whatever you do to get under their skin, but don't let them settle into their rhythm, their pace, because then you're on a hiding to nothing. You have to make them chase you. That's one of the ways you can beat them. And the sides that have beaten them have put Melbourne on the back foot. And Cronulla, that was a great win for Cronulla because of the injuries they had, but they really didn't let Melbourne settle into their rhythm of completing the set of 5, kick, complete, kick, complete, kick. They really up and down all over the place, scrappy, and the Melbourne Storm didn't like that. But it is what it is. That's the way you beat the Melbourne Storm is to not let them settle into their rhythm. If you can break up their rhythm and not allow them to control the pace of the game, you have a very good chance of beating. And there have been signs this season that they maybe not be as good as they were the last 3 years. There are signs that they are starting to they've hit that peak and they might start the drop off. They're still a dangerous side for at least another couple of years, but eventually they're going to have to retool in certain areas. And Cameron Smith is going to retire, and Craig Bellamy might want a different challenge. That's another question: is if Craig Bellamy goes, you know what, I might want to challenge myself with another team, do what I've done at Melbourne with another side over a 5-10 year period, start from scratch. Craig Bellamy could do that. He could quite honestly go to himself, I want a new challenge. And when that happens, that's going to be interesting to see how they adapt to it. Look what's happening to Brisbane right now. And that tells you all you need to know about how you do about, a transition period. Yeah, the Roosters, they didn't let Melbourne settle and they blitzed them. And look at the grand final last year, what the Roosters did to them. The Roosters have got a way of beating the Storm. Look what they did in the grand final last year. Look what they did in the league this year. Same with Cronulla. Look what they did in the grand final in 2016, and look what they did in the NRL this season so far. That's how you beat the Melbourne Storm. That's the game plan. That is that they're two of the blueprints about how to do it. But my views on the Storm are thus: I'm not a big fan of them. I think there are still some underlying issues with the Storm from the salary cap breach and how much the NRL really knew about it before it became public, and what they're doing to be cap compliant now. The jury's still out for me on some of those topics, but I bet you more comes out in the fullness of time when players retire and coaches retire and people move on and biographies and autobiographies are written and interviews are done. I think there's a lot more to the Melbourne Storm than we know about. And yeah, the salary cap breach. I look pretty. I take a yes, I am a Raiders fan, but I do take a very dim view on when you deliberately breach the rules to get an advantage. I take a dim view on it. Sport's got enough issues. Let's try and keep it as clean as possible, and then you can sell a sport to people. If there's murkiness there, that turns some fans off. But yes, I am a Raiders fan. I've always liked the Green Machine. It's something I think, I don't know why, but I always when I was younger, I always liked seeing the Raiders do well, and when I was a kid growing up, we had cable TV, so I was able to access sport from Australia and New Zealand and North America. So if you look at my channel and my playlist, the reason why I like, look, I'm wearing NHL gear. There's a reason why I like ice hockey, which is a sport in the UK that's a team sport. It's well supported and there's a decent level competition, but it's not the major sport. But I prefer watching the rugby league, the NRL and the NHL more than other leagues, partly because of when I was a kid, I was fortunate enough to have international cable TV, and I could access sport from around the world. If as a kid I didn't have that, then that changes the complexity of it entirely. But I was lucky enough when I was growing up to have that for a while, and then when I went to school, there was a lot of international students. The school I went to, and again that I think helped with uh, my fandom of certain sports and my enjoyment of certain sports. Is there were certain things that got me into those sports, and it sort of stuck. The cricket team, yeah, they are one of the best. I think it's not long before New Zealand are the best cricket team in the world. Um, they've been developing some really good players over the last 20 years, and been doing it, and people not going under the radar. They've been solid and a good unit for so long, and people have misjudged the cricket team in New Zealand, the Black Caps, for so long that it's biting other teams in the arse. New Zealand are chipping away at all forms of the game. It's not just Test cricket. They really have, over the last 20 years, unearthed some gems of players, and I've got it right. They've got the balance of the team right. They've got the culture of the team right. They've got the development processes in place. And for such a small population and such a small country, population-wise, to have a team that good speaks volumes about the quality of Kiwi sport. Your three main national sports, Union, League, and cricket. You Well, what else is there to say? They're trying to win a cricket World Cup, a Rugby Union World Cup, and they've won the Rugby League World Cup as well. They've won Union and League World Cups. They're going for cricket, and then that's the triple crown for them, isn't it? If you think about it, because they're the three team sports that they excel the most in. But they've been doing it. I don't know what it is about New Zealand as a nation, but for a population of about 5 million people, 4 million, 5 million people, you don't half develop some really good sportsmen. The UK GB is what, 65, 70 million. New Zealand's what, 60 million less people. Is the top dog in, well, one of the top dogs in three major international sports. That says something. It does. That really is a statement, a massive statement. That tells you a lot. That tells you a lot about the sporting culture, and the coaching, and how important it is, and how well respected some of these athletes are. The way they're going about it, they're doing pretty well. It would be interesting to see the Test rankings at the end of next year, or this year, sorry, where they are. But they are definitely going under the radar, and people are underestimating the Black Caps at their peril, because we all know what the All Blacks are all about. We all know what the Kiwi, Rugby League side's all about. They've had some wobbles the last couple of years, but look, they're World Cup winners as well. When cricket completes that, that's going to be parades and chaos, fireworks. The Australian cricket team, well, Smith, Warner, and Bancroft are obviously back in the contention now, back in the fold. Honestly, now that we've had a lot of time to, discuss what happened in South Africa a year ago, was there a slight overreaction? Possibly, but the issue is Australian sport as a whole has had so much negative press that it got to the point where it was a tipping point, and it just they I don't know what I think there was a toxic environment. I think not every Australian is going to be happy with David Warner, especially being back in contention for a World Cup space or a Test space or a one-day ODI space, T20, whatever it may be. I'm not sure every Australian cricketer or any cricketer is going to be happy that he's back in the fold. He brings a lot of baggage, and I would say at the moment, with the way things are going with Australian sport, there's enough controversy, enough scandal going on that they would rather this went away. But it's not making the big news at the moment because of Israel Folau and Jack de Belin and the issues with the NRL's off field ill discipline with players and everything that's happened there. It's sort of not being as reported on. But last year, people went mad, and whether they were right to go mad or not about it is open for debate. But I think the culture within that dressing room and the way they were going about playing wasn't great. There were allegations of racism and assault against certain players, and there were things going on behind the scenes that weren't great and weren't within keeping of the sports values. And Cricket Australia, much like Rugby Australia, whether they were reactive or not, and whether they got it right. Time will tell 10, 15 years down the line when we look back at that particular incident. We'll see. I haven't been to New Zealand or Australia, but I've got friends and family who live down under. But I look at their sport and how they do it and the sports culture, and it's completely different to here. I think they put a higher value on sport, and the average salaries are a lot less than some of our Premier League football players get here. A hell of a lot less. The average salary is more reasonable. Players actually get paid a reasonable salary, and it's still big money, but it's actually acceptable to me, especially in the rugby league. It's an acceptable amount of money that players earn. It's not outrageous. It's a good living they earn. I think other sporting nations could learn a lot from Australia and New Zealand when it comes to salaries and costs and making it sustainable. I think they're the European footballers, the North American athletes, they're overpaid, and long term that cannot be sustainable. There's only so much money in the world. Wellington Phoenix. I'm assuming that they're netball or ice hockey. I'm not sure with the Wellington Phoenix. It's either it's. I'm going for ice hockey, but I'm probably going to be wrong. There are some obscure teams out there that I don't know about. I'm going for ice hockey, and I'm probably wrong. It's either that or netball. But you're going to tell me, aren't you? Because I don't know. I honestly couldn't tell you. And oh right, yes, they're the A-League football team. This is, I think, a league where they haven't quite got it right. In Down Under, is the A-League. I think that's one of the leagues they haven't got it right, and they're playing catch up. But obviously the sport's growing, I think, but they are playing catch up. They haven't got it quite right. I'm not knocking them. I think it's just not one of the sports that Australia and New Zealand really focus on. I think they focus on rugby union, rugby league, cricket, and obviously Aussie rules in Australia. I think that's where most of the dynamic is the AFL and NRL in Australia, with cricket, and rugby union, rugby league in New Zealand. I think that's where most of the focus and fandom and participation is, but it is growing. What would I think help it grow more is if Australia and New Zealand, let's say, got a Football World Cup. I'm really surprised that they haven't thought about that, having a joint bid for a World Cup. I'm really surprised they haven't ever really thought about that, because that would definitely inject some life into the sport. It really would, down under. They've had Rugby Union, Rugby League, and Cricket World Cups. Really surprised they haven't thought about having the Football World Cup. And I think money's got a lot to do with it. I do, and sustainability. But we're having the same questions asked about other things. The Manchester City Champions League ban. We've seen it with AC Milan. They've had a ban where they were thrown out of Europe for a year. We've seen transfer bans on a host of Spanish clubs. We've it's a possibility. The Man City Champions League ban, but it has happened before. There is precedent with a European club in AC Milan last year not being allowed to compete in the Europa League. So there is precedent there. If there is a breach of financial fair play, that could happen. It could happen. Transfer bans, transfer embargoes are a thing. There's a lot of precedent there for a variety of reasons, not just here in the UK, but across Europe. But it's very striking when the UEFA president has come out and said financial fair play doesn't work, yet they haven't come up with a system that does, or haven't come up with a change to the system. PSG also under investigation as well for cooking the books. That this is why I can't like Manchester City. I want Watford to win today in the FA Cup final. I'm not hiding from that. I want Watford to do Man City like Wigan did a few years ago. I've got friends who are Man City fans from the old days at Main Road, okay, and I've got a lot of time for them. But I had a viewer on here once really give me a load of crap, and I went, "How long have you been supporting Man City for? Is it before or after the money?" And when he came out, it was after the 2011 Premier League win. I was like, "Oh, you're a plastic fan." And I find it difficult to love Man City because they've basically spent the better part of a decade trying to buy the league. And I don't know. I'm not a big fan of City. I used to have a little soft spot for Man City when they were the underdog. But I don't know. I've never been a big fan of Man United either. I think there are more fans of Bury in Greater Manchester than the two Manchester clubs. That says a lot. And I think the Gallagher brothers could have possibly done a much greater good buying Man City than Sheikh Mansour, because they're local lads. They've been invested in the club since they were kids. While I'm not a fan of Oasis, if they, as possible owners of a club, they're local lads. They've done good. They buy back in. Am I watching the World Championship Ice Hockey? Yes, I've watched I've watched 3 of Great Britain's games. I missed the Denmark game, frustratingly. It's an arse. But no, I've watched I watched the Germany game against the GB, and when we scored, I hit the roof. I never thought in my lifetime that I would see him at World Championships top level ever again. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be able to watch the last 2 games, which is really a kick in the teeth. But yes, I've watched a fair bit of it. Mostly the GB team because I'm British, but I've caught a few bits of other games. I would say it would be nice on YouTube if they streamed every game live and didn't put a geo block in, because I'm British and I can't watch most of the British games on the YouTube channel, apart from I think one has been put up. All the others have had a geo block put in place. I do not understand that. Completely do not understand that. It would be nice to be able to watch my nation play. That makes no sense to me. The highlights package they put up is shoddy. But when I've managed to catch the North American feeds, the US and Canadians, I've really enjoyed listening to their commentary, because it's NHL commentators commentating on the GB national side. It's brilliant. I've caught some other bits and pieces of games, yes. What I've noticed about the World Championships compared to domestic leagues, because obviously I follow the British League, is it's less physical, it's more skill based. There are more skill players playing, so there is less physicality. And part of that is to do with the Stanley Cup playoffs still being ongoing, and part of that is to do with a lot of players being physically exhausted from their regular seasons. They're physically exhausted. They've played a lot of hockey. It doesn't matter what league you play in. If you're putting yourself available for selection, a lot of players play hurt. A lot of players try and play every game of like an Ironman streak. But I have watched it. Some of the skills on display are brilliant, but Ben Bounds shutting down, you know, Jack Hughes and Capo Caco. That how he kept them out, and the save he made against Jack Hughes was brilliant. And the save on Ben Bounds' save on Jack Hughes in the USA GB game, I think, is the save of the tournament. You have to watch him how he just does him. Predictions for the FA Cup final. I want Watford to win. I think Man City might underestimate them. I think the way Watford came back against Wolves, who I was hoping would get to the final. I was hoping for a Watford-Wolves final earlier on, and obviously the draw wasn't kind to me. But the way they came back from 2-0 down to win 3-2, they have that big game character about them. Man City have fallen afoul to lesser opposition, but I'm not classing Watford as lesser opposition. I think Watford have an equal chance. Man City didn't play well against Brighton. They laboured. Every time I've seen Man City play in the FA Cup under Pep Guardiola, I've not sold on their defence at all. And I've had the debate about Emerick, Laporte, and Otamendi. Otamendi is not a good defender. I don't know how he's classed as a world-class player, because defensively he is hopeless. But that's my personal opinion on that. I do honestly think that Watford could do them. I think Watford could be that underdog. And every time a team with W in the name has won, so Wimbledon, Wigan, they were classed as the away team on the changing room. And Watford are the away team today. So I'm really looking forward to it. I think Watford will just go for broke. I don't think they're going to sit back and allow Man City to settle. I think they're just going to go for it. That's the way you beat them. I think they're going to look at what Wigan did last year to them, and in the FA Cup final in 2013, I believe it was. They all have looked at those tapes, because there's a lot of Man City players that played last year against Wigan where they were upset 1-0 and lost to Wigan in the FA Cup final. A lot of those players are still part of the squad. The tactics are still very, very similar. The setup's very similar. The style of play they have, the philosophy. I honestly think they're going to look at the tapes, look with their weak, which is from set plays, which is in the box, which is on the counter attack, and you've got to try and isolate some of that back four, because I think without Vincent Kompany in that back four, it doesn't look as stable. And people mocked Dean Michaelis for being slow, but he had great positional sense. Otamendi does not have that. Otamendi, it's always a panicky challenge. John Stones has the turning circle of a barge, and Emerick Laporte, there's a reason why he's not in the French national side. I do think, though, that, I'm going for a Watford win. I think it's going to be a fun game, however. I really do. I cannot see it being as bad as last year's FA Cup final. And if it is as bad as last year's FA Cup final, I'm going to slip my wrist. There's a reason why Emerick Laporte doesn't get in the French side. Well, there's several reasons, actually. I had a massive argument on Twitter about this, and I just gave up with some of the people. Basically, he was under 20s French captain, which is fine. It's fine, okay? But he wasn't part of the World Cup squad. And they won without him. They didn't need him in the World Cup squad. Just saying. And also, he also said if he wasn't selected by Didier Deschamps, he was more than happy to play for Spain because he's of Basque heritage, and he also claims residency. That rubbed the French Federation up the wrong way. Spain didn't need him. And now he's in limbo when it comes to what country he's going to play for, because he said he's also available for selection by the Spanish. Neither side has selected him since he said that. That is what's striking. He's not been selected since he said, I'm happy to play for Spain over France if they come calling. That hasn't endeared him to the French Federation, because they'll go, well, let's question his loyalty here. And it hasn't really endeared him to the Spanish Federation either, going, well, he's also eligible to play for France. Can we really, will he put his heart and soul into the Spanish jersey? Also, he's a Basque. That's politics in Spanish Federation. Do I have a Super League team? I'm assuming you're talking about Super League Rugby League over the English ice hockey. I want to double check that, because obviously, so you were talking about Super League Rugby League, yes? Okay, I've always been a Broncos fan because I live in the south of England. I always have been. I had a soft spot for the London Broncos. I don't really have a Super League team though. I wouldn't say I'm a London Broncos fan, but if someone said I've got Super League tickets for the Broncos, uh, insert team here, let's say Broncos Catlands or Wigan St Helens, are more likely to take the Broncos Catlands tickets. That's my personal opinion on it. I always like the underdog. And the London Broncos used to play at Harlequins, which for me is a 40-minute train journey. They used to play at the Stoop, which is Harlequins Rugby Union Ground. And for me, that's a 40-minute, 50-minute train journey. And I used to live by it. So I can quite easily get to Ealing. All I've got to do is go up the roads, 10 miles from my mate's house, park my motorbike there, get on the train at Maidenhead and get into Ealing Broadway. And, it's a short hop from the train station at Ealing to where they play. So for me, yeah, it's a hour journey into where they play. I can watch a game and get home. But I just don't have the time, really. Well, I have the time, but I'm in the process of, in the next few months, I'm moving house. My job is not actually in London or in Berkshire; it's actually in Surrey, so I have to commute for work, and so it's getting that kind of energy after a long work week, and considering how much money it costs for transport, I think the transport will actually cost more than the actual ticket price. So I think the way Super League is obsessed with the M62 corridor, it's damaging for the sport. This is where I think they have to look at really looking at seriously developing the game in the south and east of England and southwest of England, because there are people out there, potential sponsors and investors with money. And most of the money is in the south of England. But that's a debate I've had on this channel for a long, long time. Feel free to look at my rugby league and NRL videos and other live streams. We do debate it a lot because I'm assuming you're a reasonably new viewer that I haven't seen you on live stream before, Joe. So feel free to check out some of the other things. You'll notice there's not a lot of Super League videos on the channel. It's all behind a paywall, and to be honest, I find the NRL easier to access. I mean, I found the Watch NRL website, which is sanctioned by the NRL. I found a couple of other replay sites, and it's just more easily accessible. And the quality level, I will say, is higher. But I've had my views on the NRL over Super League. I can do another video on the NRL versus Super League and my changing opinions on it. But honestly, I think the NRL is a better quality product. What's happening off the field with players, however, is tarnishing the NRL's reputation, and it's an ongoing issue there. But we can discuss that later on. But yeah, no, I would be more likely to watch a Catlands Broncos game over Wigan St Helens. My view on the UEFA Nations League, well, I would watch it if it wasn't put on Sky. That's the problem. They took advantage, the TV broadcasters in this country, of England's success at the World Cup and Wales' success at the Euros a couple of years before that, where home nations were doing really well at major tournaments for the last 4 or 5 years. And they took advantage of that sudden resurgence of British teams. So Northern Ireland doing well at the Euros in 2016, the Republic being decent, Wales qualifying and doing really well, getting to a semi-final at the Euros. England get the semi-finals of the World Cup, and they come up with this UEFA Nations League format, which is UEFA's doing, and the broadcasters here put it behind a paywall of Sky. That's why I don't care. I can't access it. I'm not willing to pay Sky Sports money at this point in time. Until I move. Until I move and I get settled in my new flat at the end of the summer, I'm not willing to fork out it's a lot of money. It's not cheap. It's a lot of money. I'm not willing to fork it out. I honestly don't know how much Sky is because it depends on the Sky package you have. But I've got friends who've got Sky. My mum and my stepdad have Sky, but I don't see them often enough to really ask them how much does their Sky package cost. It depends on the package. Now they have all the sports channels. My mate doesn't have all the sports channels. He has Eurosport and Free Sports. You've got to pay on top for Premier to unlock it. And Sky, you have to have the Sky package. And to get Premier Sports, you have to have Sky to then unlock the Premier Sports package. BT Sport, again, you have to pay on top of your Sky subscription fee, so that doesn't come automatically. So there's paywall behind a paywall behind a paywall. And that's frustrating. But Premier Sports at least have got the Free Sports channel. So there is some access to sport that you wouldn't otherwise get on standard terrestrial Freeview, which is nice, but at the same time, we are starting to see a few more sports be drip fed back onto free to air. I think that's what you got. A lot of people cannot afford Sky or BT, and there's I think 17 million households that have neither Sky or BT Sport. That's why Free Sports is a channel, and that's why Free Sports is growing and getting some good viewership figures in the last 2 years. But I couldn't tell you how much Sky actually costs. I really couldn't. It's much like Fox in Australia and New Zealand, and Sky and Fox and Sky in Europe. The costs vary all over the place. Gareth Bale, look, Gareth Bale, Southampton product. You know, I think, Gareth Bale, he came through the Southampton Youth Academy, which is one of the best youth academies in the country. Got some good minutes with Southampton as a young player, alongside Theo Walcott and some other players who've come through. Ryan Bertrand have come through there. Gets bought by Tottenham cheaply and doesn't have a good start to his career at Tottenham. Every game he started, they lost. The first, I think, 56 games he played, they couldn't win. He started out as a left and right back, so he was interchangeable on either side because he's 2-footed. And then they moved him on the wing, and then they moved him as a centre forward. But he started out as a defender, as a wing back. Look, my personal view on the overinflation of the money in football with wages and transfer fees is what's killing the game. Okay, this is why Sky Sports is behind a paywall. They've caused this. The players demand more money. The transfer fees get extortionate. The fan pays. Okay, the fan pays. If enough people cancel Sky and BT, they would very quickly go free to air, and football and rugby league and would feel it most. Cricket would feel it as well, but cricket's killing itself by not having free to air coverage. I can't be any more blunt than that. Cricket, again, like you with the UEFA Nations League with the football, they took advantage of the popularity of the sport and went, okay, everyone's watching it now. And the whole nation was gripped in 2005 for the Ashes. And as soon as we won that Ashes, the next day, bang, it's behind a paywall. And a lot of people weren't happy, and a lot of people haven't gone back to cricket. And that is a massive shame. You have to have balance between free to air and pay to view. If you have that balance right, people buy in. If you solely put a lot of sports behind a paywall, people will eventually go, I'm not paying that. And the last 10 years is striking because money's been tight, wage growth isn't there, inflation. I'm lucky that I can now afford Sky and BT Sport, but I choose not to have it. And I'm also in the process of moving in the next few months, so it'd be pointless me getting a Sky subscription where I'm living now, partly because I'm not the homeowner. I mean, I'm renting off relatives at the moment in my room, as you see. This is all I have is this room, and it would be pointless me getting a subscription when I have to move, and I have to pay for a second installation fee on top of my subscription. And we already have an internet provider. You know, I don't pay the bills for the house. I pay my bills for my insurance, my tax, my phone, you know, my Xbox Live. But as soon as I move out, I've got to pay the council tax. I've got to do this. And I'd rather make sure that I have a roof over my head than pay for Sky Sports, because I think Sky Sports has been more damaging for sport long term than people realised back in the early 90s when Sky Sports was set up. I honestly think the damage that Sky Sports has done, and BT Sports, Satanta's collapse, ITV Sports collapse, yeah, that's been more damaging, I think, than people realise, and how overly reliant sports leagues and teams and clubs and certain sports are for the pay-per-view money. They are so reliant, and when a broadcaster struggles, like the Setanta collapse, look what happened to Scottish football, decimated it, and really has caused irreparable damage that is lasted to this day. It's a no-brainer. I might get Premier Sports. I prefer their content because they got the NHL. But I don't know. Also, we don't know what the new owners of Sky Comcast are going to do with their restructuring yet. If they actually make more free-to-air stuff available, where you don't need a Sky subscription, we don't know what Comcast are going to do. And that's something else that's really, really interesting. Is obviously Sky's been purchased by another company. When it comes back to Gareth Bale, he was never worth the money he was worth anyway. The transfer market's massively overinflated. No player is worth more than £1 million. No player, in my view. The transfer fees are not right. They're wrong. The wages some of these players are on are wrong. This is why I find Danny Rose such an annoying person. It's not because of the colour of his skin or the fact he's actually a very average football player. It's the fact that he came out and said, I don't want 50 grand a week anymore. That's not enough for me to live on. I want 100. That's why I lost respect for him. When he's throwing a hissy fit over getting 50 grand a week. That's more than I earn in 4.5 years. Before tax. No, actually after tax. That'd be more than I earn in 5 years. That's where football's gone wrong. That's where sport has gone wrong. When a player, an average player, okay, who's on £50,000 a week, that's £200,000 a month, is throwing his toys out the pram because he thinks he's not paid enough. And he wants double what you're getting. He wants £400,000 a month. That's where I'm scratching my head. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why I dislike football. The men's national ice hockey side right now at the World Championships, as a collective 22 players on a match that played against the US salaries equivalent to 81 million, which is basically the salary cap in the NHL. So that roster the Americans had on the ice that night is equivalent to an NHL roster. You combined all the salaries of the GB players that were named to play against the US the other night, it equivalated to £500,000 a year. A year. Danny Rose earns that in a few months, and he's whinging that he's not paid enough. I'm sorry, but I have no respect for him. It's got fuck all to do with the colour of his skin. It's got fuck all to do with his qualities as a player, which are limited, by the way. He's not actually that good. And then he says, oh, the fine that clubs get for racist chanting, I spend more than that on a weekend in London. That doesn't endear me to him either. Racism is abhorrent, but when you're comparing a fine of around £10,000 to £20,000 to what you spend on a night out, I'm sorry, that shows how out of touch you are with the average black working class man and boy who suffers racism and gang violence daily in London, in Birmingham. When you're saying 50 grand, I throw that away in a weekend. That's where I completely lose respect for Danny Rose. Some of his comments are really ill-informed and show how much of a bubble. It doesn't matter if he's from an ethnic background, these players live in. This is why I don't think Gareth Bale was ever worth the money he was worth. He's a working class lad with Walker's ears from South Wales. The average person from South Wales earns less than the average wage in this country, which is around, I think, 22,000 a year is the average wage, or 22 to 26,000. The average person in that part of South Wales, where he's from, does earn that much. They're looking at about 12 to 15. This is why I've lost respect for football as a sport, because the players are massively overpaid compared to other sports. Okay? Let me put it this way. The average NRL salary for a superstar player is 300,000 to 500,000 Australian dollars a year. Some Premier League football players, if you equivalent that to pounds, make that a week. And they're average players. Let that sink in. Let that sink in when Danny Rose is crying about earning 50,000 a week and he wants to have 100,000 a week. I'm just putting that out there. And that's my personal opinion. And this is why I think football has got so many things wrong with it. When a player is going, 50 grand a week, that's not enough for me. I want 100. How out of touch is that? If you're saying you're against racism and you want to encourage people from poor working class and ethnic backgrounds to get involved in sport and to be part of a community, you're not really in touch with that community and the struggles that they face on a daily basis. You live in a bubble. What do I think of the penalty call in the Vegas San Jose game? There's been a lot of bad calls in the playoffs this year. A lot of bad calls. Not just that. I didn't see that one, but the hand pass. Yes, the hand pass that led to the goal in the St. Louis San Jose game the other night. The response on Twitter has been really interesting. I haven't watched I actually haven't watched a lot of playoffs since the Jets, which is my team. And I'm wearing some Vegas gear, but Vegas are one of the teams that I like because of how they really gave two fingers to the league. I collect ice hockey jerseys, so I suggest you look at some of the jerseys I've got and some of the videos I've done. If you're new to the channel, they're on there somewhere. I think they're under other sport or they're just random videos. But the Vegas San Jose game, okay, it ended up deciding a series. I will say that it ended up being crucial to the series outcome. There's been a lot of bad calls in the playoffs this year, but here's the thing: the NHL has pulled those officials from that game from the rest of the playoffs. They're not reffing until next season, or being linos until next season. That's striking. But the San Jose Sharks St. Louis Blues game with the hand pass that led to a goal. Again, the reaction on Twitter, and you have to also, I'm going to put you in the direction of a guy called The Hockey Guy, fellow YouTuber. He's a pen pal of mine. I'm going to send you in his direction. He is the NHL encyclopedia, okay, as a channel. There are things about the NHL that I didn't even know that I now know about because of him. He makes some very interesting arguments and some very interesting points about the state of officiating, and he does it in a very calm way. But when I was on Twitter, I said this: either the officials are really, really bad this year, or the fix is in. And I made a hint to match fixing. You cannot be the best league in the world with the worst officiating. Or can you? Because you've got to look at the Premier League here in England with the football and Neil Warnock's comments about the Premier League and some of the officiating that we've seen with Cardiff and other teams this season. He goes, it's the best league in the world for players and intensity, but the worst league for refereeing. Is he wrong? Is he right? He got fined for that. He got fined for being honest about how he feels about the refereeing standard the last couple of years and what he's seeing as a coach. The refereeing standard in the playoffs has been poor, but last year it was goalie interference not getting called, and there were some blatant calls where, hang on a second, he's slashed the goalie in the head. As a Jets fan, when we played Vegas last year, and Neil slashed Hellebuck around the head and scored a goal and almost took his head off, and it was called a good goal, I was perplexed. Because at the beginning of last season, they did the face-off violation. And while there weren't that many penalties for the facial violation in the NHL, other leagues follow. Now, as a Bracknell Bees fan, and I went to almost all home games. I've only missed, I think, 3-4 home games the last 2 seasons. I've watched a lot of hockey. The face-off violation was called. Late hits as a call were called more. Players were getting called for late hit rather than charging, because there were some late hits that happened in the NHL the last couple of years. That's the league that leads. The other leagues around the world follow. Yeah, late hits were getting called more. And I was like, when was the last time I saw a late hit call? I haven't seen one of them for about 4 years. I saw 3 of them in 5 minutes in a game. I hadn't seen that type of penalty call in a long time. And I know that the British leagues are a lower quality and the refereeing standard isn't as good, and there isn't things like TV replays and the monitor and headset to Toronto and that kind of stuff. But when the NHL takes a stand on a rule change, so overtime being 3-on-3, every other league around the world adopted it very, very quickly within a year. I'm not a fan of the 3-on-3 overtime personally, because I think that actually increases the risk of a player getting injured because they've got to play a big space. Personally, I think there's some player welfare issues with that, but fans love it. But the penalty shootout is still a thing. Still a thing. The debate about fighting in the game. 97% of players don't want to drop it. And until we can get the players on board for a rule change, they are going to keep doing stuff. And 75 to 8% of fans polled still want to keep it in the game. They feel that the sport will lose something without that intensity, and I think they're right. But with the refereeing standards, yeah, big questions have been raised from different corners about how really poor some of the calls have been, and what changes need to be made. And I don't know what changes you can make. I have ideas, but I'm a neutral. I'm a fan. I'm looking from the outside in. I'm not in charge of the referees. I'm not an ex-player. I'm not a current player. I'm just a fan. And that debate, last year it was goal interference. This year it's missed calls or incorrect calls, and the coach's challenge. There's a lot. There's a lot to discuss. Levante lead Atletico by 2 goals at half time right now. No, I don't think La Liga is as good quality. Technically, yes. On a technical level, the skill set that players have is second to none. But I do think you have to look at the amount of teams in La Liga that have never been relegated out the top flight. There's only 4. There's only 4 teams, and I can name them for you. You've got Real Madrid and Barcelona, Athletic Bilbao, and Levante. Yeah, Levante. There's your 4 teams that have never been relegated from the top flight. Atletico have been in the second tier before, twice, I believe. I think the skill set is there, but the depth of squad is not necessarily there, and the money and the talent pool is heavily weighted. There's an imbalance. There's a massive imbalance with Spanish football. And some of the big clubs have had state aid as well, which breaches UEFA rules, but UEFA looks the other way. I do like the fact that it's getting free-to-air coverage on ITV in this country. It is getting games on ITV, but I only found that out about a month and a half ago, that ITV was showing La Liga games. But I can watch the Portuguese league on Free Sports. I can watch the Dutch league, the Belgian league on Free Sports. So again, there are several European leagues that are accessible easily in this country on free to air. But for some reason, we can't get the Champions League anymore or the Europa League because BT Sports got a monopoly, which is illegal. But the authorities look the other way. They're chasing the money. UEFA Nations League behind a paywall. That is a terrible mistake. That is a terrible error of judgment. It really is. But the qualifiers and the actual tournaments, World Cups and Euros, they're still on free to air. There would be a riot if they took them off the BBC and ITV. Absolute riot. But I think overall, is the quality level there? I think the Bundesliga is possibly the better of the 2 leagues for intensity, and Bayern Munich have definitely regressed, and Dortmund have improved, and Leipzig have been a breath of fresh air since they've been in the Bundesliga. So, in that respect, I think La Liga is starting to lose its luster. For me, I think La Liga's had its golden decade with the Champions League finalists and Europa League finalists being nearly always Spanish for the last decade. I think Spanish football's had its peak and is going back into a trough. German football, the failure at the World Cup says a lot about the German setup. They've had their good 10, 15, 20-year periods. They're going back into a little dip. The French league is one that seriously needs looking at, and the Italian league, to a point, needs looking at as well. If they are to be taken seriously, the French league is PSG, and Monaco, the second wealthiest team. Where were they this season? So money doesn't always buy you success. That's something else I will stress: is money doesn't necessarily buy you success. It can backfire, but I think at the end of the day, it's all well and good discussing overseas leagues, but I don't watch football as much as I used to. And part of that reasoning is they've taken the European club games off free-to-air TV, which is a blunder, real blunder, and people have mentioned that. And yeah, okay, BT Sport will show the Europa League and Champions League finals on YouTube. And people always ask, when are you going to go back free-to-air then? And they regularly criticise the quality of production and the commentators, and they regularly criticise BT Sport on their live streams. BT Sport takes a kick, and BT Sport is not good quality. PSG, oh god, there's issues with PSG's funding because the TV rights is owned by the same guy who owns PSG, his beIN Sports network. He's got some cushy TV deals since he's bought PSG. Monaco, they've been relegated before. It's not the first time they've had a relegation battle in their history. It won't be the last. But it does show that PSG Champions League, they fall apart. And Man City Champions League, apart from Pellegrini's trip to the semi-final, they've never actually got past that, except with Guardiola. Guardiola got to the semi-final. They've never actually got to a final. They can't win the Champions League. Europa League, they were hopeless. So Man City in Europe are not a good side. They might have the squad to dominate the domestic league, but I don't know. I think the money is ruining the game, and I think the wages are extortionate. The transfers are unacceptably high, overinflated. There's a whole host of things I could discuss with that. What's wrong with football? Like, you got to look at the 2 European finals, especially the final in Baku, where, as I said earlier, if you rewatch this live stream from the beginning when it's posted, the fact that Arsenal and Chelsea have given back half their tickets that they've been allocated, so only 6,000 fans are actually now travelling to the game from London or from the UK out of 12,000. They were only given 12,000 tickets out of an allocation on a stadium capacity of just over 68,000. And it takes 59 hours to get to Azerbaijan by car to avoid the overpriced flights that are suddenly out of nowhere, when the route was going for 49 quid to get to Baku by plane, suddenly to 849 quid as soon as the day after Arsenal and Chelsea qualified for that final. This is where UEFA have got the scheduling horribly wrong. You could quite literally work out at the quarterfinal stage your geographical locations, and you could organise a final very, very quickly. But UEFA go, no, we don't. There's nothing wrong with our process. There's everything wrong with the process. They've gone after the oil. And Henrik Mkhitaryan is Armenian. He cannot legally safely, well, he can legally travel to Azerbaijan, but his safety cannot be guaranteed because he's an Armenian. And Armenia and Azerbaijan have sort of been in a state of war since 1988. How blind could UEFA be to that issue? That a player, his safety cannot be guaranteed. They've gone with the money over morals, and this is what's killing the game. I mean, Christ, it's an 18-hour drive and via some ferries to get to Madrid by car, because people are, you have to take 8 days off work just to go to the Azerbaijan final. I mean, that tells you what's wrong with it. Luis Suarez, should Barcelona try and spend big on Jovic to replace him? Luis Suarez. The games I've seen him play this season, he's looking half a yard slower than what he was. I think his age is starting to catch up with him. I don't know. I honestly don't know with Suarez. I really don't. I think what you're going to get with him in the box. He's a sniper. He's a combative forward. He will ruffle up defenders. He'll be a pain in the arse to defend against with Suarez. He scores a lot of goals, but he's in the second half of his career now. Whether he stays at Barcelona or he goes to another league to keep playing in Europe, I don't know. Does he come back to England to play? Does he look at Italy? Does he look at Germany? Does he look at France? Does he look at another European league that maybe back to Holland? Does he go to Portugal? He could go anywhere. He could leave, finish his contract at Barcelona and leave on a free and go, I'm going to sign with a team in Uruguay or Brazil or something, and just showcase his skills in the South American leagues, which I actually really enjoy watching the South American leagues. They are fun to watch. I actually enjoy watching the MLS because while it's not as good quality as the European leagues, the games are much more open. Some of the defending is calamitous, but it's fun to watch because you don't know what's going to happen. And there actually are one or two really good quality technical players in the MLS, and a lot of them are from the South American continent: Argentinians, Chileans, Paraguayans. There's a lot of them playing in the MLS. And one thing I've always noticed about South American football is it's exceptionally skilled technically, but also they can be exceptionally cynical and violent, and they will go in with the nasty challenges, and they will go in with elbows, and they will rough up the opposition. And that's something that cynicism has always been in South American football. It's the joy of the skill and the samba style football, but also it's the negative, it's the ugly side. And I think South American football is definitely fun to watch. Yeah, I've always enjoyed watching South American football. Since I was a kid. You just got to look at some of the players that have come out of South America, like Pele and Maradona, and you really understand the technical ability that they have with the ball at their feet, and the joy when they're just playing, the joy they have playing, and the production line of players. There's too many players basically. They can't fill all the teams with all the players they keep producing. So South American football is a production line, has been for 50, 60 years, and will continue to be so. It's a religion in South America. It is just, they go mad for it. Governments have fallen because of football and the riots that ensue. It's but Suarez as an individual player, I don't know. I don't follow La Liga. I've done the odd match review on it, but I don't really follow La Liga. I don't really find football anywhere nearly as interesting as I did 5-10 years ago. I've really started to switch off football at club level. I will watch internationals. I will watch the World Cup. I will watch the Euros. I'll be watching the Women's World Cup this summer because I think they do deserve an equal shout on TV at least. We have a good chance of winning the tournament, and if the women can do it, that will be a massive shot in the arm, a positive injection of confidence in the women's game, because some of the comments they've been facing on social media have been disgusting, and some of the criticism they face. The fact that the game has only been fully professional in this country for a couple of years, they have gone leaps and bounds, and across Europe as well, they have gone leaps and bounds in their professionalism over the last couple of years. And the negativity, I always say to people, you don't like it, you don't have to fucking watch it. It's so plain and simple. If you are not interested in women's football, don't watch women's football. I'm interested in all sport, and as it's a team sport, which I find far more enjoyable than individual sports, I will watch it. And yeah, England have a very, very good chance of doing really well at the tournament. But I also, as a neutral, will watch games of teams and nations that I have no interest in. I will happily sit there and watch, Brazil play Argentina in a game, because the rivalry and the intensity. I have nothing to lose on that game. I just like watching good quality team sport. But it is what it is. That's going to be a fun tournament. It's in France again, and the French have hosted a lot of tournaments lately and done really well at it. And the French have got the Rugby Union World Cup in a few years, so France is putting its hat in the ring. And it's proving it can host these tournaments regardless of the political tensions in the country and security issues. They pulled it off. The Euros, they the Women's World Cup. They had the Rugby World Cup in 2007. They really pulled off a really couple of good tournaments over the last 20 years. With the World Cup in '98, yeah. But I mean, as far as it goes, following and supporting things. Suarez, I think, he's in the latter half of his career now. I think he might have another year at Barcelona, maybe 2. Do I think he retires after Barcelona? No, I think he will carry on for a couple more years. He might go back to Dutch football where he started his European career. He might go back to South America. He could end up back in England. Anything's possible. I think the issue with Barcelona is their key players are aging. You got to look at PK. You got to look at Messi. Rakitic, Suarez. They're your leadership group. They're getting old. They're all in their 30s now, so they're going to have to replace these players at some point. Now, whether when Messi retires or Rakitic, when they do hang up the boots or they do move on. It's filling that void. And this is where Barcelona could also be at their peak or have peaked and us on the slight decline now. It's going to be interesting to see how Barcelona, continue on over the next couple of years. It might make La Liga more interesting if Barcelona aren't so dominant. Real Madrid have had a disastrous season by their standards. Atletico have been inconsistent. And if those big three start regressing, you might see a Valencia do what they did 18 years ago. You might see a Deportivo, La Coruña, or Villarreal kind of story where they suddenly become relevant in that top 5 or 6 places. Bilbao might get back in the conversation. And when that happens, that's better for the development of players, better for the league, competition, and overall it's a better experience because you've got to look at the fact that look at PSG. How uncompetitive is League One in France. The fact that the French team won the World Cup is disguising the fact that domestically the game is not great. But there we go. I'm gonna end that there. I think that's been a good 2 hours of live stream. Haven't done one for a while. There's been some good questions and some interesting topics. There's a lot of things I would have liked to have discussed. The Israel Folau and Jack de Belin stories in Australian sport. They are really really interesting to look at the importance that they have. Going forward and the importance that those issues have on sport and the precedents that are being set. But those stories will rumble on. Jack de Belin might never play again. Israel Folau, what's his options career-wise going to be? He might never play professional sport ever again either. And they will be 2 stories that I will continue to look at from now until the end of time, probably. They're not going to go away. And Jack de Belin taking the NRL to court over the no-fault stand-down policy. And Israel Folau could go through another code of conduct hearing and appeals process to get reinstated. But who wants to play with him? And what team, be it in the Southern Hemisphere or Northern Hemisphere in professional rugby union or rugby league, wants to sign him up? Considering all the baggage that will come with him and all the press speculation that will follow that team around, which will be very distracting for the rest of the players on that squad. That's something you got to look at. Obviously, the NHL playoffs, yes, the question about the refereeing standards. The World Championship refereeing standards have been actually really, really good. There's been not a lot of missed calls in the World Championships, but there's been a load of missed calls in the NHL. That's something that's very interesting to look at, is the standards of refereeing when it comes to the World Championships versus the Stanley Cup, the 2 biggest ice hockey events of the calendar year outside of the Olympics. The fact that the refereeing standards are so variable. When the World Championships, they've got multiple nationalities of referee and linesmen. NHL, they're predominantly Canadian and US with a couple of Eastern Europeans in there. How the refereeing standards at this crucial stage are so variable is mad. But there we go. I'm going to leave that there. Thank you very, very much for watching. Please, leave your if you've caught the end of this, like and subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And I will see you guys very, very soon. Really appreciate all the questions. Obviously, to be doing a review of the FA Cup final after it's completed. And there'll be some more bits and pieces tomorrow as well. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye for now.